Ladies and gentlemen, if you would take your seats, we'll begin the ceremony in just a moment. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today for what is truly going to be a special occasion. I'm Pete Crane, the Vice President of Education and Access here at the National WWII Museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's Cajun-Acadian World War II Commemoration, a salute to French-speaking veterans, held in partnership with the Consulate of Canada. As we begin today's program, please join me in standing for the playing of the Canadian and United States national anthems. Please be seated. In keeping with the museum's tradition, we'll start this afternoon by recognizing any World War II veterans, home front workers, or Holocaust survivors in the audience joining us here or virtually. Please stand or wave from your seats. I know we got two. Gentlemen, it's our honor to pay tribute to you and your service every day here at your National World War II Museum. In particular, I'd also like to recognize these two gentlemen, Mr. Norris Morvant and Shirley Guidry. I've had the pleasure of having lunch with both of them, and you are in for a real treat today. These are wonderful men. I'd like to also thank the Gary Sinise Foundation for their general support of Mr. Morvant and Mr. Guidry's travel for today's event. I'd like to recognize at this point any other veterans in the audience that we have with us today. Any veterans who have worn the uniform at any time, please stand and be recognized. I was going to say I should have said U.S. and allies, so thank you. I would thank you for your service for everyone and for joining us this afternoon. I would also like to recognize any members of our Board of Trustees that are either with us here or are watching online today. Thank you for your service to the museum. And I'm happy to say that we have some of our Patriot Circle members and charter members with us here in attendance. Your ongoing support makes programs like this possible, so thank you for your continued commitment to the museum and for our educational mission. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to welcome the National World War II Museum's President and CEO, Stephen Watson.
Thank you, Pete, and good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for what I think is going to be a very special commemoration of the role of Cajun-Acadian veterans in World War II. So I think we take great pride here at America's National World War II Museum in being dedicated to telling the story of the full American experience in World War II, and I think it's particularly meaningful to us when we get to draw attention to the significant role of our own community that played in this global conflict. You know, we get asked all the time, I'm sure some of you in this room today, even before you came and visited, wondered why is the National World War II Museum here in New Orleans? Of course, I think you all probably know the story of Andrew Jackson Higgins and the commitment that he and his team made during the war. Those Higgins boats were used in just about every major American amphibious invasion during World War II, over 100 different invasions in Europe, in the Pacific, in North Africa, the Mediterranean. But the Louisiana story and the New Orleans story goes well beyond Higgins Industries. Communities and citizens across the state served our country when it was needed most, and I think we would say that Louisiana definitely punched above its weight. A few years ago, we said it was time to tell that story in a more complete way, and our team created an exhibit called The Pelican State Goes to War. It actually debuted here at the museum, and that has been traveling across Louisiana to just about every corner of the state over the last few years. And if you're a local, and have a chance to take a trip to Hammond, you can go to the Regional Arts Center there starting on May 6th through June 17th. You'll have a chance to see Pelican State and learn more about Louisiana's role in the war. Of course, by far, one of the most uniquely American and truly uniquely Louisianan stories of the war is that of our Cajun-Acadian veterans. We've had the privilege of recording literally dozens of these stories for our oral history project over the last 15 years. Many of those are actually available on our website. If you go to www.online.org, you can hear a lot of this personal testimony. One of those interviews is a gentleman by the name of James Sandoz, reflecting on something I'm sure that resonates with Mr. Morvant and Mr. Guidry about how they helped American efforts in France and Belgium as they could communicate with the locals, but at the same time were under a lot of pressure when they were here at home to only speak English. So we know that this was a common experience for the Cajun-Acadian veterans, and I think it's also why it's such an honor to be here to salute these two gentlemen at the museum today. So I just want to, again, I just had a chance to briefly visit with Mr. Morvant and Mr. Guidry, two great Cajun names. and just want to go off script for a moment to say, as a young man who grew up in Scotland, first time I ever got on an airplane was to go to school in Thibodaux, Louisiana, which is where Mr. Morvan has resided for the last 90 plus years. And I have a deep appreciation for Cajun culture, for the Bayou community. I spent 5 terrific years down there. I remember vividly as a 19-year-old being in Thibodaux and walking around and hearing French being spoken on campus, in the stores, and I know it's such a proud and important part of the culture. So it's personally gratifying for me today with this unusual story that I have, that we're able to honor these 2 wonderful men who are just ready for us to put some Cajun music on so they can get up and start dancing. And I don't think they were joking when they said that earlier. So thank you, Mr. Morvan and Mr. Guidry, for your service and for being here on this special day. We're, of course, grateful to have dignitaries from the state of Louisiana and Canada joining us for this international joint effort to recognize the contributions of the French-speaking service members during World War II, as well as their Francophonic heritage. And I have the privilege of introducing one of those individuals representing the state of Louisiana, the Honorable Billy Nungesser, our Lieutenant Governor. He's joined us here today. He is the 54th Lieutenant Governor of Louisiana and is the state's second in command. Amongst the many things he's responsible for is the Department of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism. And it has been a challenging time for culture, recreation, and tourism in the last couple of years. I think probably nowhere else in the country has been thrown the challenges between multiple devastating hurricanes, COVID, that have really gotten to the fabric of just about every part of this state. And I just want to say thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for your leadership, because despite all of those challenges, Louisiana has continued to thrive throughout this period, and I think as we exit the pandemic is beautifully positioned for great success in the future, thanks to your tireless leadership, that of your team. So we thank you very much for that. And we thank the state of Louisiana, which has been such an incredible partner to our museum going back to the 1990s. This museum literally would not exist without the support of multiple administrations and leadership in the state, and we appreciate that you have continued that great tradition. So please join me in welcoming our Lieutenant Governor, Billy Nungesser.
Thank you. It is truly, truly an honor to be here today. Anyone that knows me knows how I feel about our veterans and the way we honor them all over Louisiana. But knowing my job in tourism, as well as the French culture, and to keep that tradition alive, to be able to honor these special gentlemen today is just pretty incredible. And also with Canada. Canada, I actually sold my oil field business and joined partners with the Canadians, and they taught me to say, "Hey," after everything. So welcome, and this is a special moment. And after I read the history of what the French-speaking soldiers meant to the war, it was hard to put it in a few words, and they always tell me a couple minutes. But I got to tell you, the ability to communicate what it did for the war, as you were known as the Frenchies, I believe they called you. I had to get that right. Just the story after story that I read, finding solutions, overcame obstacles, and never lost sight of the goal, preserving the freedom, the opportunity for future generations. And as I always like to try to put a famous saying to a moment, it reminded me of what President John F. Kennedy said in his United Nations address in 1963, and it's truly true here today. We have the power to make this the greatest generation of mankind in the history of the world, or make it the last. And your contribution, your efforts, your bravery made sure that we continue the greatest generation and we continue to live free. My dad was a Marine, and he taught me the values, to be proud of our veterans, to appreciate the freedom that you fought for, that we enjoy today. And Ronald Reagan, my favorite president, I remember the words he said: freedom is never more than one generation away from existing. We don't pass it on to our children and our bloodline. It must be fought, protected, handed down to do the same. And he was right. And that's what you brave men did. Our parents, our grandparents fought for all that we stand for today, knowing North America was at stake. I didn't realize more than 25,000 French, Cajun translators and what you gentlemen did during the war. And it's a history that we all should learn and remember the importance of that. You know, I help promote the French speaking all over Louisiana, and these schools that teach French in the morning through the time they go home in the evening. And I only took 2 weeks of French when I was in high school. I wish I'd have stayed longer. But to know that they carried on that tradition so we can continue to communicate, and hopefully we won't have to use it in the way you gentlemen did, but it's a heritage that we need to continue. But to honor you today for your bravery, serving under General Eisenhower and General Patton, gives me goosebumps. And to know that those communication skills and the sacrifice you, your families made for what we enjoy today, words cannot express how thankful we are. And today I'm so honored to be here to honor you and all veterans for what you've done. So God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lieutenant Governor Nungesser. Thank you for your remarks in recognition and service of these great Cajun-Acadian World War II veterans. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Rachel McCormick, Consul General of Canada to the United States and of Louisiana, of Arkansas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Texas. Before assuming the role of Consul General of Canada, Dr. McCormick was head of Energy and Environment section of the Canadian Embassy in Washington, D.C. from 2014 to 2019. She joined the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade in 2004 and has represented the Government of Canada in a range of international forums, including the Arctic Council, the North American Commission for Environmental Cooperation, and the United Nations. She has a Bachelor of Arts degree in Economics for Land Use and Environmental Studies from the University of Saskatchewan and a PhD in Environmental Science from the University of Calgary. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Rachel McCormick.
Thank you. Merci. Lieutenant Governor Nungesser, colleagues, friends, Colonel Crane, Colonel Lafreniere, Mr. Watson, figuring out where I'm looking, all of the members currently serving and veterans of the Armed Forces of Canada and the United States of America. It is an honor to be with you today to celebrate these amazing men who I'm very inspired by. It was a pleasure to get to know their families and hear their stories today. And I can tell you that as somebody who has been married to someone in the military in Canada, I know how proud we are of what you've given and what you continue to give to your communities. So thank you for your service. In today's current events I think it's just so fitting for us to be here today, recognizing how important it is for Canada and the US to be standing shoulder by shoulder again. We work together in so many ways, but our security relationship is second to none. No two nations share a closer bond than the United States and Canada. Bound by geography and born out of a shared history, we are friends, we are partners, and we are allies. We have protected each other through the North American Aerospace Defense Command for more than 60 years, the longest standing joint command in the world. Together, as members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, we have assisted in safeguarding Europe for 7 decades, and we will continue to do so. United as allies, we landed in Europe, under different flags, but for the same cause, freedom. And today, we celebrate the French language and Francophone culture, and honor the brave men and women who served during World War II. French is one of the 2 official languages of Canada. It is not only an essential part of our identity and our culture, but also an important advantage that allows us to forge links with the Francophone communities around the world, including here in Louisiana. Les communautés francophones sont au cœur de notre histoire, de notre patrimoine et de notre identité en tant que pays. Au fil des siècles, elles ont joué un rôle primordial pour bâtir notre pays. Si le Canada est aujourd'hui un endroit dynamique, ouvert et inclusif, c'est en grande partie grâce à la vision des francophones et à leur travail acharné. Pendant la Seconde Guerre mondiale, plus de 1 000 Canadiens français se sont portés volontaires pour servir dans les 3 forces armées, ce qui représente un peu plus de 20% des Canadiens servant outre-mer. So 160,000 Canadians that were French served in the 3 forces of the Canadian Armed Forces, representing a little bit over 20% of the Canadians who served overseas during the Second World War. The majority of these soldiers who fought overseas did so shoulder to shoulder with their Cajun friends and cousins, serving together on foreign land. Bound by shared culture and French-speaking skills, they proved to be invaluable assets overseas as both interpreters and translators. Les communautés francophones font partie intégrante de notre identité, au Canada et en Louisiane. Si nous voulons veiller à la force de nos pays, nous devons contribuer au rayonnement du français et faire entendre la voix des Français, Acadiens et Cajuns qui le parlent à travers nos 2 pays. Time may fade, but our memories must not. We have a duty to hold the torch high and to keep its flame alight. We remember war as it was and as it is. Freedom's terrible price is known to but the few who have fought for it, and we continue to fight today. And that is why we today stand with great pride, celebrating the French speakers who served our countries so future generations can enjoy freedom. The liberty for which those of you served has been a beacon to people on every continent. It is not something I, my family, nor my fellow Canadians take for granted. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Dr. McCormick. Thank you for your recognition of the integral relationship and special friendship between our 2 countries, not only during World War II, but today and into the future. For our historical overview today, I'd like to introduce Warren Perrin. Warren's work to promote French culture has elevated him to a high level of cultural activism and helped reinvigorate the Cajun pride movement through his petition for an apology, authorship of many articles and books, chairmanship of the Francophone section of the Louisiana State Bar Association, and the establishment of the Acadian Museum, and more. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Perrin.
Merci beaucoup. C'est un grand plaisir pour moi d'être ici avec vous cet après-midi. Moi, je suis un petit Cajun de la paroisse Vermillon et j'étais né après la guerre. Mon père et mon grand-père m'ont donné la fierté pour être un Acadien, un Cajun, et un francophone. Thank you for inviting me. I was born in Vermilion Parish, and I was born right after the war. And I was imbued with the pride of being a Cajun, an Acadian, and also a francophone. In 1604, the Acadians left France and settled a small colony called Acadia. That same year, the Pilgrims, then known as the Puritans, were expelled from England. In 1620, the Pilgrims were kicked out of Europe and migrated to Boston. The next 150 years was a struggle between the British Pilgrims and the French Acadians. Those two colonies were in constant struggle and fighting for the control of North America. The deportation of the Acadians in 1755 was carried out by the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the Puritan Pilgrims. It was ethnic cleansing. They were deported to rid North America of French people. It was the first ethnic cleansing in North America carried out against Europeans. After that happened, and the Acadians were deported to the British colonies, Pascal Poirier, a famous New Brunswick politician, coined the term "a century of silence." No one spoke or wrote or sang about the deportation, a sad event in which 1/3 of the Acadian people perished. The same percentage of Jews who perished in their Holocaust. Longfellow wrote Evangeline a century later in 1848, and the world became curious. What was the Acadian deportation about? That led to the beginning of a reuniting of the Cajun and the Acadian people who had been victimized in this diaspora and sent to 40 different countries in the world. Fortunately, a unification took place led by a Judge Breaux from New Iberia, Louisiana, attended the first Acadian meeting in 1904 in Waltham, Massachusetts. That led to the World Acadian Congress, le Congrès Mondial Acadien, in 1994, the first time. The 5 million Acadians were invited to join together in a great reunification. And fortunately, this continues every 5 years. My father was drafted not being able to speak English. And he said, I was drafted a Cajun. I returned home an American. It was the first time Cajuns felt part of the American system. Il disait, j'ai parti un Cajun, mais j'ai revenu an Américain. Before that, the Acadian and Cajun experience was not part of America. We were still considered a separate people. And so how ironic, we were deported because we were French. And when World War II came and the call came, we helped win the war using our Frenchness. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Warren. We're grateful for the work that you've done to preserve this history. Another historian who's committed to honoring the Cajun Americans and Cajun-Acadians who served in World War II by preserving their stories is Dr. Jason Theriault. Dr. Jason Theriault is a historian, a writer, a consultant, and former Energy Policy Fellow at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. Dr. Theriault earned a degree in broadcast journalism from LSU and a PhD in history from the University of Houston, where he lectures on U.S. history and energy history. He began interviewing and writing about World War II veterans more than 20 years ago. In just a few moments, Dr. Theriault will be joined on stage by Norris Morvant. Mr. Morvant, who is from Thibodaux, served as a clerk in the 89th Complement Squadron of the 8th Air Corps in Europe. As a French speaker, he was assigned to transport communications and orders from General Eisenhower's headquarters, first in Normandy, then near Paris, to unit commanders out in the field. He traveled by jeep, often alone, and used his French to communicate with locals on these various trips to and from the battlefront and staging areas. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Theriault and Norris Morvant to the stage.
All right, thank you, National WWII Museum. It's truly an honor to be here and to share stories about the French-speaking World War II veterans, particularly those from South Louisiana. When I began interviewing World War II veterans some 20 years ago, I realized that a number of them had a rather unique experience. After all, most of them grew up speaking French as their first language and only learned English later on. Their ability to communicate to the locals and the French allies proved invaluable to military operations, and it gave them a distinct advantage. Ironically, these young Cajuns, not so young anymore, who spoke French at school in the 1920s and 30s were often punished. Many grew up ashamed of their language. And they were taught in schools in the 20s and the 30s that French was a backward language. It was the language of the uneducated peasants that many were told to forget. All that changed during World War II when the military recognized the benefit of having French speakers among the ranks. Certainly the same applies to our allies, Canada. A handful like Bob LeBlanc, Sam Broussard served in special forces with the Office of Strategic Services and worked closely with French resistance forces in the campaign of Normandy. Countless others, like Mr. Shirley Guidry, served as interpreters for their unit. What emerged from this unique wartime experience was a long-lost pride in their heritage. When the Army needed bilingual interpreters, they called on Frenchies to bridge the language gap. I've been fortunate enough to have interviewed several of these World War II veterans here in the last couple of years, and met Mr. Morvant here about a year ago, and probably the only 98-year-old who still hands out his business cards. Still working. Good.
Is this mic open? Okay. That's good.
Prepared questions here. All good back there? All right, Mr. Morvant. Tell us about learning French as a young Cajun living in Thibodaux. What do you remember?
Well, it comes to where we had no choice. It was at a time when French was really needed to communicate with your family or see your siblings or whatever. I didn't know a word of English until I went to school. And it was a hard time for us because all of us were doing the same thing. We all could speak French in school, but we didn't have to, and because they didn't want us to. It was a terrible thing for us to learn English all of a sudden, another language completely different from what we knew. we couldn't, we could still communicate with our family, though. That was a good thing. Other than that, it wasn't a good time for us.
Why did the teachers punish the young Cajuns in school?
I think since through the years, more than likely, America wanted all of us to be able to speak English instead of different languages. And they were forcing us to learn English, which was, I guess, a good thing in the long run, because now I can speak both languages and have no problem with that.
Mr. Morvant, you were one of 12.
Yes.
One of 12.
No, we were 10 at the
10.
time. Yes.
How did your brothers and sisters, how did they get along with learning English at a young age as well?
We got along well. We played together and really had no problem at all communicating, that's for sure. And we were blessed with a large family, including triplets. So we had a lot to do with playing and learning things, you know. So it was good.
So it was ABCs in both languages for y'all?
Excuse me?
It was ABCs, learning your ABCs in French and English?
No, ABCD. I could say the alphabet in French. My father taught us that. We used to gather around the chimney at night and say the rosary, and also learn things that my daddy was taught at school. So we had fun too, besides doing that, you know.
Let's jump forward a little bit, Mr. Morvant. In World War II, you served with the 89th Complement Squadron?
Yes, there was a service unit.
Service unit in
Yes.
the Air Corps, right?
Yes.
Tell us, what was your mission in France, and how did you use your language to communicate with the local people?
I used my language, and it was good that I knew it, because I was sent on missions that half of the time I didn't know where I was going to be able to find the place or not. And then I would find some French people and ask them, and they'd give me the way. It was good for that.
Could you tell us in French about your first encounter with French people on the beaches when you got to Normandy?
Yes, I had brought a generator for headquarters to be used at a hotel in Granville, which is on the coast and right there on the English Channel. From then on, I had a few minutes of free time, so I went on the beach, and I met two young ladies and a young man. The young man was a freedom fighter. He gave me a map of Paris, because he said, someday when Paris is going to be liberated, I want you to use it. And I did, because we were stationed right outside of Paris for a while. And so it was good to be able to meet with somebody. And of course, at first, one of the young ladies wanted to talk, and she was trying to talk English to me. And I said, have no fear, you can talk French to me. I can understand and talk to you. And we made friends, and we were friends until she passed away a couple of years back. And whenever I go to France, if I do go, they put me up. I don't have to have no hotel. They're friendly enough to be able to get me a place to stay.
How did your Cajun French compare to their backcountry French?
It was slightly different, but aside from people talking too fast, then I couldn't understand what they were saying at first, but then I'd say, well slow down a little bit. And we'll be able to talk, you know. So that's what we used to do.
And how did the officers, your bosses who worked in Eisenhower's headquarters, how did they utilize your French-speaking skills to the advantage of that office?
Well, first off, my name was Frenchy, okay? And everybody knew me as a French-speaking person. I did have the ability to go into headquarters and mingle everywhere. So I could go in any office where it had officers and all, and I could get my directions as to what I had to do that day, because every day was different. And a lot of times I wasn't there every morning. I'm out somewhere on the road. Had a lot of trips back and forth to Bordeaux where I had to get supplies. So, but a lot of times they didn't know where I was. I knew though. I knew I was in France for sure.
Did you ever run into General Eisenhower?
I had an encounter with him. I was walking down the hall one day, and lo and behold, he was coming facing me. And I backed up against the wall, and I saluted him. And he stopped, and he said, "Soldier, don't salute officers in the hallway." And he turned around and went his way, I went mine. But I was fortunate that I was able to see people like Winston Churchill, General de Gaulle, General Kerr, and quite a few other generals that hardly ever was seen anywhere, you know, other than right at headquarters.
So they felt comfortable having a Frenchie in their office with them?
Yeah.
What about the big man, General Patton? Tell us about what you did for General Patton.
Oh, for General Patton. General Patton sent orders to General Eisenhower that he needed gas to be able to go for the Battle of the Bulge. He didn't have enough gas for all the tanks that was used, all the other equipment. So for 3 days straight, that's all I did with 12 others, driving trucks to La Havre, pick up a full tank, a full truck with 2,500 gallons of gas on it, bring it to the front line, turn around, get an empty one, go back and get another full one. That's for 3 days straight in the daytime. It was grueling. But then when I went back to headquarters, a Brown Star was waiting for me. I was given a Brown Star.
So from the Bayou country in Thibodeau all the way to France, working for Eisenhower's headquarters.
How about that, huh?
How did your French work out for you then?
It worked out real good.
And tell us about your experience, how that your language changed a bit, your French language, when you got home to your parents on Christmas morning.
I got discharged and got home on Christmas morning at 4 o'clock in the morning. And of course, all my family had changed. My little sisters were not little sisters anymore. They were big. You get three years away from them, you see the difference. And it was wonderful to have my two little sisters, one on each side on my legs, and they were sitting there. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. I enjoyed that.
All right, Mr. Morvant, really appreciate you and your family coming, and also with Mr. Shirley and his family.
Aside from that, though, I was so used to speaking French, like in France, that our Cajun French is a little bit different. So naturally, my family didn't understand what I was saying all the time.
Sounds like the Frenchies had an influence on a Frenchie here.
I had to learn all over again to speak close, a little bit slower.
All right, Mr. Morvan, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Dr. Theriault and Norris, for sharing your incredible story with us today. Didn't we tell you it was going to be wonderful? I'd like to now introduce Colonel Alain Lafreniere. Colonel Lafreniere currently serves as the Canadian Forces Air and Space Attaché in Washington, D.C., a position he's held since the summer of 2021. He previously served as coordinator for the Director General of Operations at the Canadian Joint Operational Command Headquarters before being selected to serve as the military assistant to the Governor General of Canada in the fall of 2020. In his 20-plus years with the Canadian Forces, he's also served as tactical coordinator and tactical coordinator instructor on the 423rd Maritime Helicopter Squadron and the 406th Maritime Operational Training Squadron. He was selected to command the latter in the summer of 2017. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Colonel Lafreniere to the stage as we continue to recognize the service of Cajun-Acadian World War II veterans.
Distinguished veterans, les anciens combattants distingués, esteemed colleagues, families and friends, Messieurs Morvan, Monsieur Guidry, bonjour. Before we move into the presentation, and on behalf of the Canadian Defense Attaché, I would like to thank you for the invitation to be here, traveling from Washington, D.C. today, and join in this very, very special commemorative event today. As you know, the United States and Canada share a special military relationship over the past 100 years, which is built on service and sacrifice. We fought together in the First and Second World War, in Korea, and in numerous theaters since, including Afghanistan more recently. Given the brutal nature of war and all the heroic acts that resulted, it is important that we do everything we can to preserve that history and continue to learn from it. I'm grateful for a museum like this. I'm grateful for this museum and for the effort that is being made to ensure that special stories preserved and to ensure that the Canadian and Acadian soldier who made a special contribution to the Allied victory of the Second World War, that this is never lost. As a current member of the Canadian Armed Forces who was raised in a family where we spoke French and in a community where I spoke French, actually I didn't speak that much English until I joined the Canadian Forces when I was 22 years old, I can almost somewhat appreciate what our veterans have been through as they left home to join a military organization and go across the world to serve their country, and all while doing that in their second language. Which is something very special and dear to my heart. With that thought in mind, en tant que francophone canadien, je vous offre mes sincères remerciements pour votre service distingué. As part of a more formal acknowledgement of thanks to our veterans here today, I will now present you with flags of Canada. I also want to let you know that both of these flags have actually been flown on the Canadian Embassy recently. And now for the presentations. For our first honoree, I'll present the Canadian flag to Norris Morvan in appreciation for your service in the Allied forces during World War II. Our second honoree for today's program is Addie Melanson. Please direct your attention to the screen as we learn more about Addie's service in World War II.
My name is Addie Melanson, and I'm the only one left out of the 105 6th Infantry. I was a farmer right here, make sugarcane. We used to load 2 tons of sugarcane before we go to school. Well, they called me from Brobridge for me if I wanted to join the National Guard. At that time, $13 a month was a lot of money, and I joined the Guard. Well, we went to camp, and my brother, who was 15 months older than me, joined. But I had lied 1 year, so that made us 3 months apart. Colonel Castile called us in one day. He said, I know your dad and your mom are good people, but how they made you all 3 months apart, I don't know. So I told him, I said, Colonel, I lied about my age. I said, you can get me out. No, he said, I have to have 135 people to go to Camp Landing. If I let you go, I gotta find somebody to replace you. Just forget about the age. And that's how I ended up at Camp Landing. But when I went to school, I spoke French. I got punished because I was speaking French instead of English. With a ruler. She was a mean bitch. Boy, you had to be careful what you said in class and what you did out of class. Nobody spoke English at all. Nobody knew anything about English. None. All my mama's brothers and sisters didn't know a damn word in English. They all spoke French until we got to school. I got off a ship at Lahore, France. And they found out I could speak French. And the train was supposed to come pick up some troops. And when they got there, I started talking Acadian French. That old Frenchman on the train said, Quoi vous dites? I told him in Acadian French. He dit, tu comprends pas du tout? I said, well, why not? Well, he said, that's not French. So I realized I had to change my language. So I said, you talk to me. And it didn't take long for me to adapt myself to their French, where they could not adapt themselves to Cajun French. Most of the words in Cajun French came from the people from Nova Scotia. Their French and our French was pretty close together. We could find out from the French people where the Germans were. I was asked to talk to the French people to find out what was ahead. Not all the time, but most of the time they were helpful. And it helped a lot. It protected me because I wasn't in the front. I was in the back listening to the French people. The French people I don't know if they could say Frenchy or what, but they could say Cajun. But everybody in my company called me Cajun. Le Cajun. Le Cajun, yes, that was me.
Thank you for your service, Addie. Although he could not be here with us today, we wanted to recognize his service, and we'll be sending his flag to his home in Brobridge. Please join me for a round of applause in his honor. Our third honoree for today's program is Shirley Guidry. Please direct your attention to the screen again to learn more about Shirley's service in World War II.
I'm Shirley Guidry. I was born and raised in Raleigh, Louisiana. I was raised on a farm, and matter of fact, at the age of 6 years old, on the day of my birthday, 1931, August the 10th, I started picking cotton. And later on, at 12 years old, I was in a wagon on the rice field, bringing the rice to the old tractor. And at 12 years old, I was on a wagon, so I know what work is. I couldn't speak a word English when I went to school. At 6 years old, the teacher had to teach us how to speak English. And thank God, her name was Miss Kate. The whole teacher that was crazy, so he took the time to teach us how to speak English. We landed in France, and in England, I'm sorry, we landed in England, Bristol, England, and crossed the English Channel on Christmas Day, 1944. Wow. And wound up in France, and then eventually went to the wall, into Germany, and we built the last bridge of the wall on the Elbe River. Well, because I talked to them, see? Mm-hmm. That's when they're all excited. It's all American talking French. So we thought, and then of course, my friends of mine, they called me over. And talking to them, they know what they were saying, so I had to come and interpret, you know. They were so happy to be able to talk to somebody in French, you know. But he said, comment ça va, miss? Comment ça va? It's different than the Cajuns, you know. Comment ça va? C'est bon. And big to do, you know. They were so happy to hear somebody, an American talk French, you know. It was broken French, but I got along with it. And then, of course, like I said, they called me over, guy, because they're trying to interpret what they were saying. And but those French were really beautiful people. They had some coffee for that, and they put the cognac instead of whiskey, cognac. Des pouces café. Ils se voulaient des pouces café. Ouais. And tasted like ham. We drank it, you know. They didn't like the cognac in my coffee. Pouce café, they call it. So, but they were beautiful people, no. They were so happy to see the Americans, you know. Yeah, especially when we got in France, you know. Those guys couldn't. I was the only one that could speak Cajun, French. So naturally, they called me over when they meet somebody on the street or something. They were talking, they didn't know what they were saying. So, hey, Guy, come here. Called me over, so I go in and we started talking, and then I interpreted them what they were saying, you know. So it came in handy, it really did, you know. My Cajun ancestry really came in handy, yeah.
On behalf of the Canadian government, I will now present the Canadian flag to Shirley Guidry in appreciation to your service to the Allied forces during World War II. Our final honoree for today's program is Alphonse Vautour. Please direct your attention to the screen to learn more about Alphonse's service during World War II.
My name is Alphonse Vautour, and I was with the North Shore Regiment.
So the North Shore, there was a lot of French speakers in
Well,
the
they're
region.
from a Bathurst,
Yeah.
Bathurst area.
Yeah.
It's all French, well, mostly.
Okay. Okay. Did the officers let you speak in French amongst yourself? Did you have to?
Oh, no, you spoke whatever you like.
Okay.
No, no.
That never was a
But
problem.
it didn't take long that I learned English enough.
You were on Juno Beach on June 6th.
Yeah.
Wh-
The first landing.
The first group, the very first
The first
group.
group.
Okay. Okay. So when you opened the door, you were the first ones to.
Yeah. I was driving the bring anchor. It's a tank, and not a big tank.
Okay.
It was going about 30 miles an hour.
Parce que ils veulent savoir si tu sentais que c'était pas bon de parler français pendant la guerre, s'il y avait les Anglais étaient un peu contre ça ou
Non,
sentais-tu?
non.
Non.
Tout le monde était amis, là.
Ouais, dans ce temps-là, tout le monde était allé.
T'es tout allé.
Ouais. Donc, quand c'était. Ouais. Puis dans North Shore Regiment, il y avait quand même pas mal de Français, là. Il y avait
T'étais mêlé.
T'étais mêlé, ouais, c'est ça. Puis il y avait des officiers qui étaient français. Hein. Il y avait des officiers qui étaient anglais. Puis tout le monde était. OK. Hein?
Non, c'était une affaire que je comprenais.
So Dad, well, we know that you never made it to Louisiana, but do you want to say a special message for the people, the Cajun in Louisiana?
In Louisiana. I wish if there was a trip, I would come. I think I feel good enough. I would like to go.
To Louisiana.
Louisiana. Meet some people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you would feel right at home.
Unfortunately, Alphonse Vautour passed away during the planning of this program in the spring. He knew that he was going to be recognized during today's program, and he was honored. We will be presenting the flag of Canada to his family at a later date. Please join me in a round of applause in his honor.
Thank you to each of our veterans recognized in today's program for your service during World War II to the United States and to Canada. Despite the challenges that you may have faced growing up due to your Francophone heritage, you were able to channel your dual linguistic ability to help win the war. Our nations will be forever grateful for your contribution. I'd also like to thank today our sponsors, and I'd like to especially thank the Gary Sinise Foundation for sponsoring the travel of our veterans recognized in today's program. Thank you to everyone who joined us in person, and thank you for those who joined us online today for today's commemoration. Please take care, and we'll see you again next time here at the National World War II Museum.